Hello and welcome to the 5th edition of our New South Wales Life Members Series. Today we're here with a man who's refereed 192 first grade games, including 17 finals and 3 grand finals. He was also chairman of our grade association. It's Michael Stone. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, Daniel. Lovely to hear from you.
How are you going, Mick, in this brave new world of social distancing and self-isolation? How are you keeping yourself busy and occupied?
Well, as luck would have it, just before this coronavirus business, we acquired a young puppy dog. So we've been out every morning exercising a Labrador Kelpie cross puppy, which is, for a 70-year-old, it's really keeping us busy, I can tell you.
What's its name?
Herbie.
Okay. I like that name. I like the name.
And I was told that I must have named it after Herbie Freeman from Western Suburbs. So I don't know. It might have been something deep in the back there, because that's one player that I have sent off, Herbie.
I was going to say, does it have similar traits to Herbie?
Yeah, disobedient.
All right. So you live up in a lovely part of the world, one of my favourite places, Foster. What took you up there initially, and when did you move up there?
Well, we used to come up here on holidays, like a lot of the current residents did, but we stayed in a block of units with Dennis Spagarino and Michael Ryan and the families for 2 weeks over Christmas, and we just used to have a ball. That went on for about 15 years or more, and my wife decided that it was a place that we should retire to, and that's what we did. We came up. We knew a lot of the people up here anyway. A lot of the people I played golf with, and so it was just a natural place to gravitate to when we finally stopped working.
I suppose with the bypasses and whatnot that's coming, it's not that far from Sydney anymore.
No, it's not. It's about 2 hours and 57 minutes from Wahroonga.
Yeah, if you get a good run.
Exactly, if you get a good run. It'll be a lot quicker these days.
So before we start talking about your very successful on-field career, what was work like for Mick Stone before and during refereeing?
I worked in the Australian Taxation Office for 25 years. Worked through all of the technical areas, investigations, and the appeals branch, which was the legal side of the joint. I used to represent the commissioner in hearings before the administrative tribunals, and brief counsel in court cases. Finally, I ended up as the boss of sales tax. So it was a pretty good job. I've been told many times. Jim Hall was the first one that said it to me that I wasn't satisfied only to be hated 5 days a week as a tax officer. I became a referee so I could be hated 7 days a week. So it's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah. No, that's good. So you refereed in an era before full-time referees. How did you find the work-life family balance?
It was difficult. Strangely enough, when I was first graded, we used to train the hell out of ourselves pre-season, and then once the competition started, we didn't train anymore. We only trained individually. It was only a few years into my grade career that we started training one night a week, which was a Wednesday night, and then later on a couple of nights a week. So to that extent, we didn't flog ourselves like the blokes today. So we could get around balancing work, family, and refereeing.
So let's start by going all the way back to the beginning. Why did you take up the whistle all those years ago? When did you take up the whistle? And I believe you started in the Western Suburbs district.
I did. Yes, I did, and that's a story my wife really hates me telling, because we married the year before, 1972, and I was getting a little podgy, and she said, "Oh, you're getting a bit fat. I wanted to do a bit of exercise," and I wasn't all that keen on the exercising business. And she said, "Look, you like rugby league? Why don't you become a referee?" you can referee down the park there on a Saturday afternoon. That'd be good fun, wouldn't it? I said yes, of course it would. So I did. I approached Western Suburbs, and Laurie Brugger's actually put me through my ticket. He was a Western Suburbs junior, and I joined the West referees. And of course, every time I mention it to Judy, if I'm public speaking, and I get that question, and I always answer it, she just puts her head on the table and bashes her head on the on the table. So it's all. If people are complaining about me as a referee, I say, well, just blame my wife. It's her fault. She forced me into it.
And I suppose you've got ammunition up your sleeve when you're at a referee's function or something. You can always point the finger and say, "You got me involved."
That's right. It's her fault. Go and see her. Yeah.
So was Western Suburbs purely a geographical decision at that time where you were living, or had you heard good things about that association?
No, it was. I was a big Magpies fan as a kid. I followed Western Suburbs all through, so it was a natural progression. And I lived at 5 Dock on the right side of the road to join West. And I'm very lucky I did, because in those days, West had 2 A-grade competitions, so 20 A-grade sides. So it was very, very quickly that you found yourself refereeing men. And that really, you had to either aim up or get out, because it was tough stuff. And there were a lot of ex-grade footballers that came back as captain coaches and senior players in the West Junior Leagues. And I was very thankful for my grounding, because when I was graded and I went into grade, I found that there were referees from other districts that never refereed men. Mm-hmm. They went terrific in under 21s, that sort of thing. Once they got to reserve grade, they hit a brick wall, because they just didn't know how to handle men. And of course, I'd been doing that for several years at West, and it really helped my progression through the ranks.
I think, unfortunately, to a lesser degree, that's still very much the case today with the way the competition structures are. People not refereeing men by the time they get into junior reps and graded squads and the like. So your graded member, 681. Can you tell us a little bit of the story about from when you came into grade, who let you know that you were graded, and then up to the time just before your first grade debut?
Oh, well, I was graded in 1978, yep. And that was a time when Greg Hartley had just started his ascendancy to the top referee. So there was a fair amount of controversy, I might say. That's a strange word to use with refereeing, isn't it? Controversy?
No, it never comes up. Never comes up.
Fair amount of controversy in those days, but I was around about the last of 13 referees to get a start in the centre for some reason or other. Maybe because Eric Cox wasn't all that keen on me, but he used to confuse me with another guy called John Yard from Parramatta.
Parramatta, yep.
And maybe that was the reason. I don't know, but finally I got a call about 10 o'clock one Saturday night to say that Richie Humphries had retired out of the blue, and I was to referee the following day at Cronulla, a 3rd grade game, and so I had to get myself into in a match frame and get out to Cronulla and start what became a very long career.
So your first,
sorry.
So your first grade debut comes in round 20 of 1981 in a match between Canterbury and South at Belmore. What were your memories of the week leading up to it first, and then the game itself?
The week leading up to it. Now this is a strange one as well, because I had a skin cancer on my forehead that needed removal, and I actually went into hospital to have it removed. But obviously I didn't tell I didn't tell anyone, because if you told someone, then you wouldn't be considered for a match the next week. And I was in reserve grade, and Greg Hartley was injured, and he actually pulled out, and that's how I got my start in first grade. And so when I was told that I was been appointed to my first grade game, I was actually sitting in hospital waiting to go in and have this cancer removed from my forehead. And when I ran out on the field for my first grade game, I had this whacking great big bit of plaster stuck over my forehead. So that was the week leading up to my first grade debut. It's a wonder that I got to game number 2 with that sort of start.
So coming from your time as a junior and early in the grade ranks, you mentioned names like Laurie Breers. Were there any referees that you looked up to, or anyone that was heavily involved in your career or influencing your development?
Well, Bill Pearson from Western Suburbs certainly influenced my career, but I always wanted to be like Gary Cook. Gary Cook was never seemed to be flustered or concerned or worried at all. He always seemed to have everyone under his control. He just seemed to turn up and things that happened for him without really making a big fuss, and he tended to blend into the background, and that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be someone that would blend into the background and not be at the forefront of everything. And whilst Laurie Breers was a member of Western Suburbs Referees Association, I admired Laurie. He was the type that hands on the hips and a very, very strutting sort of refereeing style. And I remember Bill Pearson saying to me once that I was too much Gary Cook and not enough Laurie Breers. It was only later that I discovered that, in fact, to get like Gary Cook or to get like Bill Harrigan, Greg McCallum, you've actually got to do the hard work first and be the tough guy first, and then people will know that if you say something, that there'll be a sting at the end of it if they don't do it. So that was something that I learned. I tried from the start to just be wander out like Gary and do a Gary Cook, but it didn't work out that way. It had to be more like Laurie Breers to start with, and then I could be a little more like Gary Cook later.
So with that in mind, what, looking back on your career, what were your strengths as a referee? What persona did you put out there, and what was your reputation? What were you known for, would you say?
Well, I was known for my decision making. Certainly wasn't known for my speed. There was none of that. I was known for my decision making and being able to read a game and get to a position where I could make a call. Dennis Braybrook once said to me, I have absolutely no idea how you got to where you got to or how you made that decision, but you got it right, and that's the only thing that matters. And that's basically it, I think, decision making. And the other thing is that I seem to get on with players. I guess I'm a people's person. I had a good rapport with players. There's only a couple really that I didn't really get along with, and after I'd retired, when I bumped into those blokes, I was fine with them. So that's about me.
All right, let's play a bit of fantasy here. You've obviously been referee's boss before. You're doing the appointments. If Mick Stone could pick his 2 touch judges over the course of his career, who would those 2 people be?
Yes, there's been some good ones. Early in my career, Ian McCall and Maxie Tomset were the top touch judges, and Brian Wiseman, Vince Smith, late Vince Smith, ran a couple of Origins for me. He was terrific. Johnny Colenso ran an Origin with me, and Rossi Pickard ran a couple of grand finals. Yep. But if I was to pick the 2 touch judges, I'd pick Mick Ryan twice. Mick obviously from Western Suburbs, and I knew him before we went into grade. But Mick and I had an ability, an innate ability to know what the other one was thinking.
Yeah.
And if there was, you'd think, oh, in the run of play, you think, well, hang on, I think something's wrong. You'd look across, and Mick would be standing in an unusual position, or he'd be giving me a bit of a signal, or he'd just look at me, and I'd know what he was thinking. And whilst all the touch judges I ran with were terrific, and particularly the blokes that I mentioned, but Mick Ryan was just that step above, and I think he officiated in 5 grand finals himself.
So you were involved in a very unusual incident in round 18 of 1983, whereby 3 different referees were required to control a first grade match between Easts, as you can see on screen, and the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. So you were carried off the field with a leg injury, and then the reserve grade referee, I think Lionel Green, took over at halftime. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, it's a very short story as far as I was concerned. I lasted 4 minutes. I'd awarded the penalty to East, I think, as I recall, against Canterbury. And Mike Eden took the shot for goal. And the goalposts at the Sydney Sports Ground in those days were very short. And the ball went over the post. I thought it went inside, and I stood ready to award the goal. And the 2 touch judges waved it away. Max Tom said, I know it was on that game. Waved it away. And I was caught a little bit by surprise, because I thought it went through. But I signalled no goal and stepped off my right foot and stepped in a hole. And the leg gave way. I did my anterior cruciate ligament. I didn't think I'd had one. I'd never heard of one before that time. But I did the anterior cruciate ligament. And that was it. 4 minutes into the game, and Larry Britton from Canterbury came on and said, oh, mate, you're finished for the day. I said, you betcha I am. And they carried me off. Lionel Green, I think he'd been into his third or fourth beer at that stage, came on to do the next 36 minutes, suffered from cramp. And Paul Miller, who had done the 3rd grade game, was called on to do the second half. And Paul now lives about 2 streets from me, down that way. So there's 2 first grade referees live within a couple of streets of each other in Foster. And that's the story. And then I was operated on later that week, out for the rest of the season, and started back in 1984.
So that's interesting that the 3rd grade referee was actually still at the ground at the time. That might not be the case these days. But yes, as you said, that cut your first season as a referee short.
Yeah, certainly cut 1983 short, that's for sure.
Now, another, I suppose, incident that came up in your career was the quickest send-off in the history of first grade rugby league. It's Peter Kelly. I think it's Anzac Day, 1986. What were your memories of that particular incident?
There's memories of that and the aftermath. A lot of memories. Whenever I'm asked about it at a function, I always say, now listen, how many of you people here are world record holders? Anyone hold the world record? Any world record holders here? And no one puts their hand up. I say, well, I am. I share it with Peter Kelly. And of course, I tell the story of Anzac Day, the bugler in the centre of the Sydney Cricket Ground, playing the last post, and Nipper Nelson and Barry Nelson, the 2 respective presidents, standing side by side. And as the last strains of the last post die off into the background, so they walk off the ground. And as they get to the touchline, because the old bugler was a veteran, and he had a significant limp, so he was very slow. So, and there's a big gap between the touch line and the member stand where they were heading. So as soon as they hit the touch line, I signalled time on. Canterbury kicked off. The ball went to Ross Harrington, who caught the ball in front of the old hill, and took the ball up to the 20-metre line, where Peter Kelly hit him with the best stiff arm tackle you've ever seen in your life, right around the head. And when he was still in the air, of course, I'd blown the whistle and signalled to Peter, okay, mate, you're off. And I sent him. And 8.66 seconds, I think it was timed at. The quickest send-off in the history of the game. Dennis Braybrook once told me that you haven't made it in rugby league unless you make the front and back page of the same edition of the newspaper. And that day we made it.
Oh,
it was a huge front page with a big headline. That will be all, thank you, Mr. Kelly. And the story, of course, on the back page. So we made that. But there's more to it. Of course, Kelly runs off. He gets to the member stand. Barry Nelson, the Canterbury president, pulls the gate open for the bugler to walk through, and Kelly beats the bugler off the paddock. Barry Nelson didn't know until half-time that he'd been sent off. He thought that he'd forgotten his mouthguard or something. But wait, there's more. There's more. Of course, we've got the judiciary on Tuesday night, which in those days, of course, the referee acted as the informant. You go along and give the story. My version of events was, Peter Kelly hit this bloke around the head and I sent him off. Any questions for the referee? No questions. And then, of course, I had to sit through the whole rest of the hearing, which went for hours, because Kel was a vital part of the Canterbury pack, and they desperately wanted him to get off. So late into the night, must have been about 10 o'clock or something, finally Jim Comans, the chairman of the judiciary, said to Peter Kelly, well, give us your version of events. And he said, I hit him around the chest, ball and all, hit him around the chest, ball and all. And the chairman said, how do you know that you didn't hit him in the head? And Kel thought for a minute and said, well, when I hit him in the head, it makes a different noise. So he got 4 weeks.
Yep. I suppose it just shows you've got to be on from the start of the game.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it didn't matter if it was the first tackle or the last tackle. It was one that deserved the send off, and so that was it.
Let's talk about your state of origins and multiple city countries and test matches now. I'll pick out 2 particular incidences from your state of origin career in a moment. But can we just talk about state of origin in general? How did you find the experience compared to club footy? And how did you find out you were getting that first game at Lang Park in '87?
Oh, well, Dennis Braybrook rang me and said, mate, you've got the origin. Congratulations. And I said, oh, thanks very much. He said, you go up the morning of the game and come back next day. I said, yep, okay, fine, right. And that was about it. There wasn't a lot of talk. Dennis was a good coach in that he didn't try to overcoach you. He didn't try to. He'd say to you, well, you've got the appointment and you deserve to get the appointment because of these reasons. Now, if you keep on doing that, then everything will be fine. But the difference is huge. And I'll give you just a brief example. I flew up to Brisbane with my wife, and we were sitting in the plane, and taxied into the terminal, and we're getting off, and there's a whole lot of lights out the front, and I said to Judy, must be someone important on the plane. So I looked behind me, and didn't recognise anyone, and then as I walked off the plane, of course, all the lights and cameras and everyone else followed me, and that's how different it was.
Yeah.
It was just from then. And of course, Judy said, what are we going to do? I said, just keep on walking, it's all right. Channel 9 approached me and said, can we do a quick interview? I said, yes, fine. And they asked me about this young halfback. There was a new halfback. Laurie Spooner hadn't been picked. He was playing for East and was a really good halfback. Anyway, they overlooked him for some kid from Ipswich. And of course, you wouldn't have heard from him again. His name was Alan Langer. It was Alan Langer's first game, and they asked me about him, and very diplomatically I said, well, I'm sure that the Queensland selectors know what they're doing. If this kid is good enough, he'll show it. He certainly did. So it was an extraordinary game. That game, Origin 1 in 1987, is probably arguably the best game of football that I've ever been involved in. And it was so far, and I'd already done a grand final in '86, but it was just an extraordinary game. The pace and ferocity and everything else about the game, and the passion. Queensland, Lang Park is extraordinary. It's an extraordinary thing. It's a real cauldron. You've been there, Daniel. So it's just an extraordinary place.
You actually, it's funny, you actually refereed all your State of Origins, except for the USA game, which we'll talk about in a minute, at Lang Park.
Yes, I did, yep.
So, and you were, as you said, first game, heavily involved at the end. We've got this incident here. We've got the call of the century that you got. What was running through your mind at the time, and how did that play out?
It was pretty much the same as all referees. You just look at an incident and you make a call. Yep. Vince Smith was running on that line. I mentioned Vince before, and the ball was knocked down, I think, by Peter Jackson. The ball was passed inside by E.T., knocked down by Peter Jackson, and Mark McGaw got his hand of the football. And as a referee, when you see a loose ball like that in the in goal, you focus solely on the football. You forget about everything else and just focus on the football. And the last time I saw the football and the hand went on it, it was in the field of play. And only by millimetres, I know, but it was in the field of play. And I looked to Vince, and he gave me the nod. Said, "Yep, that's a try." And we honestly, we didn't think anything of it. Yep. We didn't think anything of it at all. I remember Vince then came in and said that Mark McGaw was being pulled back by Peter Jackson, and he came in to report that incident. He said, I'm pleased it was a try, just the two of us together. I'm pleased it was a try. He said, otherwise he might have had to award a penalty try. And I looked around at the crowd at Lang Park and I said, yeah, bullshit, I might give a penalty and see if they can kick it, but no penalty try there.
I suppose that's one.
Later on, of course, it was the importance of that decision, for me personally, became absolutely clear, because there's absolutely no doubt that I wouldn't be talking to you now if I'd have got it wrong. If I'd have got it wrong, perhaps I wouldn't have done any more grand finals, and wouldn't have become the coach of referees in a later life. It was, you know, when you talk about turning points or pivotal points in your life, that was certainly one. That incident in time was a pivotal point in my professional career.
I suppose it's one that people outside of our refereeing family don't really understand. As referees, yes, we have an appreciation at the time for the significance of a particular decision, but our focus at that time is solely on just making what we believe at the time to be the right call. Yep,
that's right. And I didn't understand the fuss after the game. It was only until later on that it really became of major significance.
We can see on screen here you were.
Just on that.
Yep.
It was the first time that I'd ever refereed Wally Lewis too, and we had a reception in the stand underneath the old stand, with a lot of people in a very crowded room. This would have been an hour and a half after the game, maybe. We were standing around having a drink, and all of a sudden the room went quiet, and it was like the Dead Silly parting. And at the end of this long tunnel was Wally Lewis. He was still in his match gear without his boots. He just walked up, stuck his hand out, and I put my hand out. We shook hands, and without a word, he just turned around and walked off. And I thought, well, I guess that's significant. Mind you, there've been other times when Wally and I didn't quite get on all that famously, but that was one time when he obviously conceded that, okay, it was a good game and the better side won, or the referee was okay.
So Origin 4, they call it, in 1987, you get the trip of a life to go over to the US, and you referee the Origin game at Veterans Memorial Stadium in Long Beach. How did you find that experience?
It was fantastic. It was a phenomenal experience. The whole experience, again, getting the call to say you've got the game. Johnny Colenso was on my line, and the grasshopper, Barry Gamersall, was on the other line, and he is a great travelling companion. Barry, say what you like about him as a referee, but he was a great travel companion, great sense of humour. I've got to say, he was bored on the line. He didn't like this business of running around with a flag in his hand. He would rather have been out there with a whistle. And he'd do things that would not confuse you, but he'd just get bored and he'd think, oh, I'll do something here. In that particular game, New South Wales won the game, but they scored a try. And you must remember that New South Wales have lost a series.
Yep.
So they went to Los Angeles with a chip on their shoulder, and they set out to unsettle the Queenslanders who'd spent the flight over to Los Angeles on the drink, and were having a really good time. And Ron Willey, the New South Wales coach, had banned everyone from having a drink until after the game, and was serious about winning the game. And before the game, the secretary of the Australian Rugby League had come into our dressing room and said, look, no one in America understands the send-off rule, so nobody. I said, well, if it happens, it happens. Oh, well, we can't let that happen. And I said, look, I'll see what I can do. Look, but no promises, but I'll see what I can. Anyway, he's gone back into the dressing room and said to the New South Wales players, "No worry, no one's going to get sent off today." So I wondered why the Blues went out and caused absolute mayhem at the start of the game. That was why. So that was a difficult situation. Getting back to Barry, New South Wales had scored a try in the corner, and I went in to award the try. But Barry was standing on the field of play side of the corner post, which is universal language for, hey, listen, I think there's a problem with the try. So I blew the whistle, I stopped playing. I walked over to him and said, oh, Barry, is there anything wrong with the try? And he just shook his head and said, nah, it wasn't close enough to disallow, and walked past me. So that was his little dig at, well, I'm a Queenslander, and everyone thinks I'm going to cheat for Queensland. But he was, I'll tell you, a funny guy to travel with. One of the lasting memories, of course, of that game is they had this big banner, which the players had to run through, and Sterlo was the captain of New South Wales. He bounced off it. It took about 3 or 4 people ripping at the thing to get through it.
I suppose probably the other notable incident from your Origin career is the sin bin of Wally Lewis, and then the raining of cans onto the field. Now, we haven't seen something like that, not since a couple of years ago, where we had the Easter clash between the Bulldogs and South, and Jared Sutton and Nick Beashall, Gavin Morris walking off the field. How did you find that as an experience? Was that scary at the time, or did you just take it on the shoulder? How did you find that?
Well, again, Daniel, as referees, you just deal with stuff as they come along. The incident occurred. It was a tough game. We missed Steve. Well, got Steve Roach, but I got a kind of a watery report early in the game where Steve had belted Bob Lindner off the ball, and probably deserved to be sent off, to be honest. Now I've looked at the replay, but it was well off the ball. The report I got was, he just punched him, and that was about it. And that fired Queensland up and Queenslanders up, and it was a very tough game from then on. In this incident, Greg Canescu was involved with a New South Wales player, and Wally was trying to talk to me when the touch judge Ross Pickard was giving his report, and in the end I said, look, if you don't shut up, I'll send you off. And Wally kept on saying, but he had the effing ball, he had the effing ball, he had the effing ball. He just wouldn't shut up, so I sent him. And the look on his face was quite extraordinary. And he just couldn't believe I was so stupid as to send Wally Lewis off at Lang Park. And reflection, yeah, maybe I was. But then, of course, all the cans came on. There was thousands of them, and so in the course of events, I said to the ball boys, "Can you get rid of the cans?" So what they did, of course, is they threw them back into the crowd, which gave the crowd more ammunition to throw back at me. I was asked once at a function, a lady said, "I saw all the beer coming out of the cans," because you see the liquid coming out of the cans as they were coming onto the field. And in those days, they used to push people into Lang Park, cram them in, and they carried cans of Forex in, and they wouldn't be able to go to the toilet because they couldn't get through the crowd to get back out of the toilet. So what they used to do is they empty their bladder into the empty cans and just put them at their feet. And they were the cans that they were throwing at me. So it might have been beer when it came into Lang Park, but by the time it came to me, it had been passed through their kidneys.
All right, let's move on to your grand final career. Now, your first grand final comes at the SCG in 1986. I've got the SCG here in the background. It's Parramatta versus Canterbury. It's known for several reasons. It's the last game of Mick Cronin and Ray Price's career. Phil Sigsworth gets sent off in this game. What were your memories leading up to the game and then the game itself?
Well, it's a great week, the grand final week. You go to the Carbine Club, and then the Referees Association would have their final meeting for the year, and so it's a huge build up to around about that Thursday, and Thursday is the last official function, and then you just build up to the game privately from there. But it's a huge build up. Anyone that's been involved in a grand final will tell you that it's the best week of your life. And of course, being my first grand final, it was even better. And of course, between the two best clubs of the 80s, these two clubs won 8 grand finals between them in the 80s, and it was the last of the really tough, tight grand finals. The previous 2 grand finals hadn't yielded much in the way of points, but we certainly didn't expect the grand final to go trials. It was tough. There's a lot of very hard tackles, tough tackles, illegal tackles, a lot of penalties. Andrew Farrer hit Mick Delroy with a huge tackle, and it rendered Mick Delroy unconscious. It just seemed at the time to be a tough tackle, but on reflection, he got him. He got him. It's one of those ones that you get sometimes and you don't. Phil Sigsworth's a bit unlucky. I had a beer with him a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Oh, you made a mistake." Well, I said, "No, I didn't make a mistake. He hit Brett Kenny around the head, and I sent you off." And he said, "Oh, well," he said, "a lot of other people deserve to go before me." I said, maybe. But then again, the policeman who pulls you over and says you're doing 80, it's 50 zone, and you say everyone else is, and it's, "Yeah, but I got you."
Yeah.
That's the only answer you can give.
Yeah.
It was. He was lucky to the extent that if it happened in the first minute, you'd probably caution him and had a beer. But it had got to the stage where something had to give, otherwise the game would have exploded. Yeah. So the last player to be sent off in a grand final, and after the incident a couple of grand finals ago where someone got kicked in the head and no one got sent off, I'd say it will be the last player to be sent off in a grand final. The only trialist grand final
in history,
and one of the toughest games I've ever refereed. Steve Mortimer later said to me, the last tackle, Mark Buggan ran from dummy half and got pulled down a metre short, and the siren went, and that was it. And Steve Mortimer said to me, you know, if we had one more tackle, we would have won the comp. I said, yeah, I agree, because Parramatta were out on their feet. They were out on their feet in that corner. If Mark had passed the ball, they'd probably scored. But certainly, if it had gone one more tackle, Canterbury certainly win.
Yep.
But as it was, it's and as I remind, there's a lot of Parramatta supporters up around Foster. As I remind them all, I was the last referee to referee a Parramatta grand final win.
I want to get you out of retirement.
Yeah.
So your first grand final comes after Kevin Roberts had his own run of 3 straight grand finals. In 87, it's a very different grand final from the one in 86. It's the last grand final at the SCG, and this is your second straight grand final. You're starting a run of your own. How did you find that, Canberra's first grand final?
It was good. Mal Meninga had broken his arm already for the second time, so he had a great huge padding on his arm, and it was a strange thing because I had to go and inspect the padding before he got changed, and it was huge. I think I asked him to take some of the padding off. It was a very hard padding, and also it was an enormously hot day, very hot. Ken Stephen, who was the secretary of the rugby league, was dying of cancer, and he did the toss. And when he tossed, Paul Vorton called, won the toss, and he looked at me and said, "We'll bat." So that's quintessentially Paul Vorton, obviously. We'll bat. It was that hot. And I said, "Well, come on, what are you going to do?" So I said, "We'll run that way." It wasn't an extraordinary game in that it wasn't a particularly difficult game to referee, I didn't think. I know that O'Sullivan scored a try from the dead man's play. Went down injured. The rule in those days was that both sides had to be back 5 metres, the attacking and defending side. And Chris O'Sullivan used to do what was known as a dead man's play. He'd go down injured and play the ball, and then stay down injured. And then when the next play the ball happens, he jumps to life, collects the ball, and hopefully scores a try. That's what he did. So there was some conjecture about him not being back to 5 metres, but in truth, we didn't ever police the 5 metres on the attacking side, and so that was by the by. But it was the last, as I say, the last grand final of the cricket ground until, well, maybe this year, if we get one. If we get one, yeah.
So your third grand final is at the SFS, the Sydney Football Stadium. So the first grand final at the Sydney Football Stadium. It's also noted for Steve Mortimer comes on as a late substitute in his final game. And this one was different to 87 again. It was on from the start. There was a blue in the first couple of minutes.
Yeah, there certainly was. There were a few stinks in the first few minutes, but at the toss, I knew it was going to be on. Wayne Pearce and Peter Tunks just wouldn't look at each other, and I tried to talk to them, and they just grunted, and then we had the toss, and okay, right. And I went in and said to the touch judges, I said, "Fellas, it's going to be on," and it was. It was. Canterbury, of course, had a really tough side, and in those days, they didn't win all their games, Canterbury, but on the Monday morning, whoever played them on Sunday, they knew when they woke up that they'd played against Canterbury because they were just a hard side. And at one stage, Peter Tunks was given the ball and ran straight at and over the top of Benny Elias, and blue ensued. It was about the third blue, I think, in the first 5 minutes of the game. And Ross Pickard, touch judge, said to me, "Stoney, we have to do something here." He said, "Look, don't take too much notice of this report, but it's going to be a strong one. I said, okay, fine. So his report went along the lines of this player here, Peter Tunks, who still had the ball in his hand, mind you, and he was the captain of Canterbury. This player here, Tunks, ran at player laying on the ground there, Ben Elias, who was laying on the ground, looking with one eye open, and deliberately lifted his knee up into this man's head and kneed him in the head. And of course, Tunksy, listening to that, thinks, golly, I'm going to get sent off.
Yep.
I'm going to use a swear word there. I'm going to get sent off. And I said, what? I asked him to repeat the report. And he repeated it word for word. And I said, right. I said, you're off. And I said, you're off for 10. And he dropped the ball and ran off that quick. He was that pleased to get 10 minutes. He was absolutely delighted. Some time later, Phil Gould, who was coaching Canterbury at the time, said to me, I heard what that report was. He said, that's a send-off report, isn't it? I said, well, under normal circumstances it is. I said, but I knew that he didn't lift his knee into Elias. I said, he just tried to bash him out of the way. And he said, so he shouldn't have got the send in. I said, well, yeah. I said, I had to do something to bring the game under control. And that's what we did.
So your illustrious first grade career finishes in 1989 with a minor semi-final between Canberra and...
Aren't you going to ask me about Ellery Hanley? Everyone else does.
Oh, we can talk about... Do you want to talk about Ellery Hanley?
Well, I can talk about it. I didn't see it. That's about the size of it. The Balmain supporters will always say to me, look, everyone at the ground saw Terry Lamb hit Hanley and all that sort of thing. The story that I tell them is that about 15 years later, Mick Ryan, who was on my line, said to me, oh, Grammy, he said, oh, look, I'm just watching Optus and it's got the 1988 grand final on it. I said, yeah. He said, oh, the Hanley incident's just come up. I said, yeah. And he said, it doesn't look too good. I said, Mick, you could have told me before now. and that was about the size of it. I guess it was one that went through to the keeper.
Yeah. No, we all make mistakes at different stages and don't see things. So your career ended in 1989 with a minor semi-final. Yep. I believe, did you referee the reserve grade grand final that year though with Parramatta and
yes, I did.
Bears to finish off?
Parramatta and North, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Bears. How did you,
I
suppose, how did the end of your career come about? Was it of your own choosing or?
Well, it was in the end. I think that year I'd suffered a ruptured plantar fascial ligament in the base of my foot, and I'd refereed all year with it, and so it became a very, very long and painful year for me. By that time, it had cleared up, but it had taken its toll, to be honest. And there was a young bloke by the name of Bill Harrigan who was clearly a referee of the future. Dennis saw a lot in him, and it wasn't too hard to see something in Bill. And it was a matter of, I thought it would be a matter of, well, going back and being an also ran instead of being the lead referee. And I thought, no, well, I'll do other things. I had a call to do some commentating with 4BC, and so I said to Dennis, well, that's it for me. I'll retire, and I went behind the microphone for a year, which I think that's one that I wasn't very good at. But anyway, that's what I did for a year before I started coaching.
So as you just mentioned, you finished your first grade career, but that's not the end of your story in terms of refereeing. You move into the coaching of referees, both in the NRL and in the reserve grade squads over the years to come. How did this come about, and how did you handle those pressure cooker positions?
Donnie Furner, who was in charge of the referees at the New South Wales rugby league, rang myself and Barry Barnes and Kevin Roberts, and he said, "Look, I want you to come on board and coach the referees for me." That was in 91. So 91 and 92, we did that on a part-time basis. And at the end of 92, there was an incident involving Marty Weeks, and Max Tomsett and I went in to see John Quayle to protest his innocence in the incident. And when we were leaving, John Quayle said, "Oh, will you wait here, Mick? I want to see you." So he closed the door, and we sat down, and he offered me the job as the head coach. And at that stage, as the group head of sales tax in the tax office, I wasn't going anywhere else really. So I looked at it as if, well, this is a new challenge for me. So I took it up, and it was a great decision, because it was a fantastic job working with John Quayle and Donny Ferner. Everyone from the New South Wales Rugby League was fantastic, and that's whilst my mother was absolutely aghast leaving the public service, it was a good career move.
Yep. So you were involved in a few innovations during your time. In 1994, you were involved in the earpieces and microphones on flags for touch judges.
Absolutely, yeah. that was something that started with Donny Ferner, but then we, when I came on board, we actually implemented it. When you look at the technology now, and you look back at those days, it was quite strange. The touch judge would be running along, and you have to press a button and put his flag up, and commentators got used to this, and they'd look at it and say, "Oh yeah, the touch judge has seen it because he's talking into his flag," and that used to be the saying, talking into your flag. We did a few things. I got on a committee, or formed a committee with the head of officiating in the AFL, rugby union, and soccer, and we used to meet once a month to discuss our own issues and problems. And strangely enough, we had a lot of common problems, and we implemented quite a number of different strategies to overcome those problems. So yeah, it was terrific. But then of course we ran smack bang into Super League,
yep,
which was
whole nother story.
Not the greatest time of anyone's life.
So you became a life member of our association in 1989. There's a picture of you receiving a certificate many years later. Can you tell us a bit about what this recognition meant to you? You'd had many achievements on the field, but this was something off the field.
Yeah, it's to be made a life member of any organisation is a wonderful honour, and New South Wales Referees Association, it's right up there. It's just the best. It's a recognition for the work that you've done, not necessarily, and certainly very little to do with what you're doing on the football field, more to do with what you're doing off the football field, on the executive, working with other people in the association. So it's a recognition for that. Like the grand finals and the states of origins and that sort of thing is a recognition of your performance on the field. Certainly, life membership is a recognition of your contribution to the game and to refereeing generally, and that's I take that honour. That's a wonderful honour. Funnily enough, I probably have done more since I got that life membership. Yep. In that I implemented a coach the coaches course back in 2000. I during my career as a referee's coach, I knew that there was a hell of a lot of talent out in the bush, but it just never got to see the light of day. For one thing, they were coached by people who really weren't able to see what was needed to bring them up to speed, to get them to be a contender, to be a graded referee. I thought that if I was able to broaden the base of referees, then there would be more referees that would contend to get in. That the competition would be better. So therefore, refereeing would be better. And I spoke to the New South Wales executive, and they weren't all that keen. And by that time, I'd had a fair bit of work done with the New South Wales Country Referees Association. So Kevin Riolo and Mick Best agreed to run a pilot in Goulburn and another one in northern New South Wales. And the rest, as they say, is history. It took off, and I devised the thing, wrote the first lot, and then presented most of them, but with a lot of help from guys like Richie Johnson and later David Jay and a lot of other people. It became an actual accredited position. So I was really proud of that contribution, which, strangely enough, was after I became a life member of the New South Wales Referees Association.
We'll talk about another contribution in a moment, but it's one thing to be recognised for receiving an award, but even more so to have one named after yourself. The grade squad's referee is named the Mick Stone Medal. Can you talk to us about how that recognition came about and what did this mean personally for you?
Yeah, sure. 2006, I think it was, I took over the reserve grade squad. Robert Finch wanted me to take over the squad, and he thought that they were probably a little soft, and he wasn't confident in bringing them up into the first grade arena. So I went down there as the bad guy, basically. Ask any of the guys. I got in there. I kicked ass. I fined blokes if they weren't trying hard enough, or if they were late for training, if they left early, or if they tried to leave the field and go to the toilet. It was just, I was just a hard ass, and it surprised me when I think the first winner was Chris James, and we implemented it as the referee's referee.
Yeah.
And in 2007, when I'd gone back into the first grade fold with Finchy, and I think Smithy was coaching the second grade squad. Chris James rang me and said, "Oh, the referees have had a meeting, and they want to name the referee's referee the Mick Stone Medal." Well, yeah, I was chuffed. I was really, really chuffed. I couldn't have thought of a better honour. And these were blokes that I'd flogged.
Yeah.
But they were referees, and they knew the concept of doing hard work and getting through the hard work and the benefits of the hard work later on. Look, I was delighted. Probably more delighted than receiving the life membership, actually. But anyway, it's still in existence, and it's a really important award to be. You can get appointments, or you can be told that you're the number one referee in a game or whatever. But to actually be the referee's referee, in other words, yeah, your peers vote for you. That is a huge honour. It's something that I would have liked to have had back in my day, but of course we didn't have that sort of thing. But it would have been nice to have seen where I stood in that category.
I'm sure you would have rated very highly. You mentioned contributions since your life membership. In 2013, you're actually president of this great association. How did you find leading such a well-known organisation with a great history and reputation?
Well, it was it wasn't hard with the people that we had on the board. They worked feverishly. Certainly, Frank Leonard as executive officer was a very hard worker for the association, and the rest of the guys were dedicated. It came about in a strange sort of way. I was badgered into to standing for the position.
Was that after Spags, great mate Spags?
No, it was after Chris Ward was the chairman, and there were people that thought that the Referees Association was heading in the wrong direction, so I was badgered into standing. I stood, and hopefully in that single year that I was the chairman, we got things running in the direction that people were more comfortable with, and then handed over to Paul Simpkins, who did a fantastic job in bringing the association through to what it is today.
You certainly did, and Peter Filmer has continued in that vein.
Oh yeah.
So you've done a little bit of guest speaking at events since your retirement, including Gloucester Sports Awards and other various function wests. Do you enjoy public speaking, sharing your stories, or is this something that was a bit daunting initially?
No, I think once you've been out in the paddock with in front of 50,000 people and a few million others watching it on TV, I think speaking about it comes pretty naturally. Harking back to my days in the public service, I got to say that the public sector does training very, very well. Does it better than the private sector, in my view. And I did public speaking courses there. And, all of that helped for the time that you needed to pick up a microphone. As a matter of fact, now my wife actually gave me my own personal microphone because she said that I should go to bed with it. I love a microphone that much.
All right, before we head into our Fast Five either or to finish off, I've been asking all members in this strange and I suppose unprecedented times of self-isolation, we're really missing the game, and we reflect on what the game has given us. What's probably the biggest benefit or the biggest asset that rugby league refereeing has given you?
Well, friendship, mostly. And the friendships come from in strange form, not only referees, but well, for example, Phil Sigsworth, who I mentioned. I do run a golf day up here for the Men of League, and Phil now lives in Port Macquarie, so Phil came down. Andrew Farrer came, and these are guys who you're still involved with. Jeff Carr, former chairman of the CEO of the New South Wales Rugby League. I'm still good friends with him. It just goes on and on. They're just relationships that you've built through all facets of the game. That's what really is brought about. And still now, when I run a function or something here at the golf club, or someone will come up and ask me about something to do with the game, or I remember when you did so and so, and my response to them is generally, "Hang on, you're not that old." Or they'll say, "I remember you," and I'll say, "Hang on, I remember your voice. Did you yell at me once?" And it breaks barriers down. It's a difficult thing to comprehend, but you're famous. It's extraordinary.
All right, we've got a quick Fast Five to finish off. Barbecue or tomato sauce?
Oh, tomato.
Ford or Holden?
The last one I had was a Holden.
Did you have a Monaro or a Tirana or a Commodore?
Commodore. It was the one I took from the league, and it died last year.
Now, you've done both of these on field, State of Origin or Grand Final?
State of Origin is the best game in the world because it's got arguably the 34 best players in the world on the field at the one time. But the grand final is a culmination of an entire year. It marks you as the #1 referee, grand final.
Yep. I suppose this one's very relevant considering where you live, beach or snow?
Oh, beach.
And the last one, money or free time?
Free time. Free time for sure.
All right. Thank you, Mick, for your time today. As a referee who loves listening to old stories and someone who hasn't actually had a lot to do with you in the past, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit here and chat with you and find out a bit more about your career, both on and off the field. Stay safe, look after yourself and your family, and we'll be in touch.
Same to you, Daniel. Thanks very much for the opportunity.